Today's lesson is on Chapter 2, Lesson 7, on pages 119 through 124. Our objective is I can use the distributive property to multiply mentally. Vocabulary is distributive property. Question 1, what does the parenthesis in the operation mean? Question 2, solve 3 times 76 using the distributive model below. And here's a video to show you the distributive property.
In this lesson, you will learn to solve single-digit by multi-digit multiplication problems by using the distributive property. The distributive property is a trick mathematicians use every day. It's a way of making arithmetic and algebraic math problems easier. Even scientists use it, so get ready for some very important information. You may have heard the word distribute in class. For example, your teacher might ask you to distribute the homework to every student to take home. Distribute essentially means to spread out. But just like in class, when you give each classmate the same amount of homework, we will distribute the same number to each factor when we multiply using the distributive property. You know that any number can be written in expanded notation to show the value of each digit. For example, 1,259 can be expressed as 1,000 plus 200 plus 50 plus 9. You also know that numbers can be decomposed in different ways. For example, 327 can be expressed as 3 hundreds, 2 tens, and 7 ones, or 2 hundreds, 12 tens, and 7 ones, or 2 hundreds, 11 tens, and 17 ones, or 300, 1 ten, and 17 ones. The possibilities are endless, but being able to imagine them can help us add and multiply more quickly and in our heads. I'm going to show you how the distributive property works by starting with an array. Here we have a very large array. It's an 8 by 13 array. It would take me way too long to count all the stars here to find the product of 8 times 13. However, I could break this array into 2 arrays. That would be easy for me to multiply. I know how to multiply by 10, so I can break apart the array into an 8 by 10 array, and I'm left with an 8 by 3 array. Notice I always have 8 because there are always 8 rows. I'm just splitting the columns into 2 groups. The product of 8 times 10 is 80, and the product of 8 times 3 is 24. So when I add the products of the 2 arrays, I get 80 plus 24, which is 104. 8 times 13 is 104. There are 104 stars in this array. What we just did was break 13 into its parts. 13 is 1 10 and 3 ones, or 10 plus 3. Then we multiplied each part by our factor 8. In other words, we distributed the times 8 to 10 and to 3. That can be represented as 8 times 10 plus 8 times 3. Remember, the parentheses tell us to do that operation first. The ability to multiply one factor by the decomposed parts of the other factor is the distributive property. Let's say you have 24 times 7. You can't solve this in your head, but if you break 24 into 2 tens and 4 ones, you can multiply each of those parts by 7. 24 times 7 becomes 20 plus 4 times 7. You will distribute or place the times 7 next to each number, but we won't get rid of the addition sign. You will distribute the times 7 to 20, that becomes 20 times 7, and you'll distribute the times 7 to 4, which becomes 4 times 7. Plus sign stays where it was. 20 times 7 is 140, plus 4 times 7 is 28. 140 plus 28 equals 168. So 24 times 7 is 168. And that is an example of using the distributive property. Let's see how this works with a larger number. 5,704 times 6. Our first step will be to break 5,704 into its parts. 5,000 plus 700 plus 0 tens plus 4. And all of that we will multiply by 6. Now we will distribute our times 6, each part of 5,704. So 5,000 times 6, 700 times 6, and 6 times 4. We don't need to worry about the tens because 6 times 0 is still going to be 0. Now I will rewrite the problem with parentheses. 5,000 times 6 plus 700 times 6 plus 4 times 6. 5,000 times 6 is like 5 times 6, which is 30, and then 3 zeros on the end, so that's 30,000. Plus 700 times 6 is like 7 times 6, which is 42, and then 2 zeros on the end, 4,200. Plus 4 times 6 is 24. I will add up these partial products and get a total of 34,224. The answer to 5,704 times 6 is 34,224. Now you know how to solve single-digit by multi-digit multiplication problems by using the distributive property.
Okay, so let's look at this in our book. So the distributive property gives you an example of how we're going to do this. So it looks like the area model that we just talked about, and it's talking about 3 times 42. So basically it's the same thing you were doing in the area model, but we're just kind of showing the steps more. So first we're going to break apart that 42 into its place values of 40 plus 2. And then it's written out here, 3 times 42 is the same as 3 times 40 plus 2. So you're going to have to apply the distributive property. So that means we're going to deal out that 3 to each of those parts, to the 40 and the 2. So 40 times 3 and 3 times 2. And that gives us, once we multiply those, that's our partial products, like they did here. So that's what they did here in the area model, 3 times 40 and 3 times 2. And then their partial products were 120 and 6. So then we have to add those together, just like we did in the area model. So I'm going to put this on so you can see. Okay, so see how the 3, they're multiplied by 3, went out to the 40 and the 2. And then we just put the parentheses around it so that we applied the distributive property. We added together those partial products, and we got our answer of 126. Okay, so once again, your homework helper gives you the steps on page 123. So in this case, it's a word problem where they're trying to figure out 29 students each paid $2 to pet the animals. So you have to use that distributive property, 29 times 2. So we know we can break apart that 29 into 20 plus 9. So that's our first step. So 2 times 29 is the same thing as 2 times 20 plus 9. Then we got to apply the distributive property. So we have to deal out that 2 to each of those parts. So 2 times 20 and 2 times 9. Then we multiply. So 2 times 20, we get 40. 2 times 9, we get 18. Then we have to add those up because we still have that addition sign there. And we get 58. So they spent $58 at the petting zoo. Okay, so let's look back at the questions. If you're stuck on question 1, I would look back at that video. And also you can just look back at the video and in your book for a little more help on that and think about that one. What do the parentheses mean? And question 2, work that out. Okay,